You are watching Cable 10, Aurora, Illinois Community Access Channel.
Let's briefly talk YouTube filming setups. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, but all my videos I film in the daylight because I just like to have natural light. But then like I'll record like right now, like in the morning, and I have this light coming through this window right here, and it's a little too harsh, and I have these reflections in my glasses. But this is also why I don't have a ring light, because I've always been concerned about having the ring light reflections in my but I've noticed that some of you out there have become lighting experts just through YouTube. And I find that very interesting and a little bit obsessive compulsive and kind of arrogant too. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so bright face in the video today. I was, and I've actually been thinking about kind of like doing this before, and then I forgot about it, and then I was chatting with a buddy that I know through making these videos, and we were talking about certain bands and how they had like one album and that was it. So I thought I would pull some records that I could just think of off the top of my head out of my collection that by bands and artists that I only need one album by. And I'm not talking like, I don't need all their albums, so I'm just gonna get a greatest hits. I mean, literally the only thing I have by them is a studio album, but it's also the only thing that I want by them or that I would ever want by them. The greatest amount of examples that I have of bands and artists that I only really need one album by are really kind of indie bands from the 2000s or the 2010s or whatever. A prime example of that would be this album, the self-titled debut album by Clap Your Hands Say Yeah, which I absolutely love this album. I think it's a fantastic album, and I decided to hang on to it because of how much I love it, but I've just never really been impressed or had any desire to get anything else by this band. Another example of that, and again, these would not be shocking to anyone. I'm going to get to some later that might be a little bit more controversial. But, you know, a guy like Michael Cronin, this is MC2. I believe, even though it's called MC2, I believe it's his third studio album. And he's got, I don't know, at least 5, 6 albums, if not more. And this album, it sounds like the Beach Boys meets like 90s distorted alt rock. So it's kind of like the next step beyond like Jesus and Mary Chain's Psycho Candy or something. But anyway, I just absolutely love this album. Never been interested in anything else that he's ever put out. And I've sampled it. Then there are bands like this, Charleston, South Carolina's Shovels and Rope, who I've seen live. I love them. I've had 4 of their albums, and I've just culled it down to their debut. It's really the only one that I need. There might be an occasional moment where I miss a song or 2 off their other albums, and, you know, I could just stream that. But this is the only one that I need like a physical copy of that I just can't let go. I just absolutely love this debut by a fantastic duo. Here's another one that's kind of niche, right? That, again, would not be surprising to anyone, but might make Sam the Vinyl Douche cringe. The Albemarle Sound by Ladybug Transistor. This is a band that has an extensive discography, and I've had multiple albums by them at different points, but this is the only one that I ever really feel like I need. It's the only one that I ever really return to over and over again. I think it's very close to a perfect album, and I just don't feel like they ever top themselves with this one. So yeah. So here are two artists, bands that are in that kind of indie world, but have a pretty big following, pretty devoted following, big ticket draws, you know, in that, on a certain level, right? They're not selling out arenas or anything, but you know what I mean. The first one is Bright Eyes. I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. This is the only Bright Eyes album that I've ever really felt like I need to have. For Bright Eyes, it's kind of an outlier because it's kind of the folky Americana ode to like alt country kind of record. Now Conor Oberst would make a whole nother solo career or with, you know, other side projects, you know, with that sound. But as far as Bright Eyes goes, this is kind of the most folky, rootsy kind of album that they ever put out as a group. So maybe that's why it's the one that resonates with me. But yeah, it's the only one I've ever really felt like I needed to keep. And this was the band that actually got this conversation started with my buddy David Ellis, was Turn on the Bright Lights by Interpol. I think that this album is definitely one, and I don't like to be that guy that's like their first album's the best and then I lost interest. I know a lot of people like that. I hear that a lot from a lot of people, Dom. And, but like, I don't like to be that guy, but this one is hands down the example of that, in my opinion, where this album is so fucking great, but then everything that they put out after, in my opinion, is just not that good. Okay, so kind of bringing it back closer to the real demographic of the vinyl community. So get away from that indie rock shit. Another big example of this in my collection were bands from like the 80s. Bands like Tears for Fears or NXS that I only really had like one album by on vinyl. And I was like, why do I even really need that one album? Like, why am I holding on to that one album? And then I would just like purge them. But then there are some, like a guy like this, like Marshall Crenshaw and his debut record. I never really needed anything else by him, but yet I can't let this one go. I don't feel like it's taking up shelf space because I love it. I love the sound of this album. I had his follow-up. I got rid of it. This is what I need from him, and that's it, you know? How about somebody like J.J. Cale? Act Naturally from, when is this, 1972? An immense amount of respect for J.J. Cale. I absolutely love J.J. Cale, but I only really need this one record. You know, I've tried to track down other copies of some of his other albums from this era. I've come across them, and they all just ended up being quality-wise disappointments. This one is just the only one that I've just ever held on to, and I just don't see myself going out there and just grabbing and seeking out J.J. Cale. You know, this is all I need. And it's as close, it's very, another one of those, it's very close to a perfect record. But yeah, Naturally by J.J. Cale. I think I said Act Naturally earlier, like Buck Owens. So I really wanted to like have like just a slew of records by big names, you know, that I only have one album by. I'd honestly have a longer list of bands and artists that are huge names that I have no records by, like The Doors. These were the ones that I could find, that I could think of. You don't really see me show a ton of punk, and that's because my punk collection is mostly kind of like those punk albums that you would see on every list of like the greatest punk albums, and those are the ones that I just kind of tend to grab, or the ones that I've tended to like seek out. And I only have like, you know, a few bands that I have like a few albums by, like I have a few albums by the Dead Kennedys and a few albums by the Ramones. But most of my punk is really just kind of like one album, one legendary album by a certain artist. Perfect example would be Damaged by Black Flag. And I gotta be honest, don't really need all the Black Flags. I think this is really all I need. Sorry, Vinyl Richie. That talk about devoted fans. But I've only ever needed Flood by They Might Be Giants. And I'm not saying they don't have other good albums, and a lot of their early stuff I had at one point on CD, I think. Great output, and even some records after this, really good. There was one record that came out in the 90s when I was in high school that me and some friends used to listen to a lot. Flood by They Might Be Giants. absolutely incredible album from start to finish. I just love this record, and I just never really felt the need to have anything else by them. Now this is one that's I've always found interesting, and I've had 5 records by this band at one point. Blondie and Parallel Lines, and this album is one of my all-time favorite records. When I did my list of my favorite 200 albums, this was in the top 100. This was in the top 70. I love Parallel Lines. Love this album. And yet for some reason, I've just never really felt compelled to hang on to any of their other studio records. Their debut is good, but just kind of hit or miss. The couple of albums that came out after this one, like in 78, 79, some good songs on those records. Just never really felt like I needed to hold on to them. But Parallel Lines is an absolute fucking masterpiece, and I will always have this record as long as I have a record collection. Now the good stuff, and I swear to you, I am not being a contrarian by showing this artist. And actually, I only have one solo album by some of his bandmates. Ram by Paul McCartney. And Paul and Linda McCartney. This is the only Paul solo album that I need. This is it. And I would even go beyond that. Wings, even the Wings stuff. I don't need any of the Wings stuff on vinyl. Don't need it. I've had Band on the Run, purged it. Don't need it. And this is not me like picking at Massey or Beatles fans or anything. This is just honest. This is just me being honest. Ram, I absolutely love. And I think it's the best thing that he ever put out, non-Beatles. You know, I said a couple of his bandmates. So this is the only George Harrison I have, All Things Must Pass. And I've had this for years. I found it used like back when I still only had like maybe 50 to 100 records, and I was still buying mostly CDs. I've had this ever since then. I have bought other George Harrison albums since, and then I've just ended up purging them. This is the only one I need. I thought the same thing for Lennon, but I actually do have 2 John Lennon albums. Now, I was going to keep this strictly to vinyl, but I also, this band also came up in that conversation because their Interpol is opening for them right now. And this is the only thing that I have left by the Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream, and I have the deluxe box CD version. I had Siamese Dream, a 1992 pressing on Caroline, and I sold it because the money was just too good. I couldn't turn it down. And actually, I probably could have gotten double for it than at the time that I sold it. I think I sold it for $250, $300. It was a VG plus copy on the orange vinyl. I'm sorry, guys. I'm like the one outlier guy that was like a teen in the 90s that this is the only Smashing Pumpkins album that I really still connect with. I think Melancholy's too long, and I think it's bloated, and I'm sorry. It's just true. Gish, I've just never felt it was strong enough. And then any of the subsequent albums after Melancholy, just never really my thing. I do love that B-Sides compilation. Love is a strong word. I still really like that. The one that had the cover of Landslide on it. Some good stuff on that album. Siamese Dream by Smashing Pumpkins. The only thing that I ever really need by them. I'd like to see, I bet some people out there have like some just like really strong controversial ones, you know? But I don't want anybody just to get on here and be like a freaking contrarian and just try to like rib people, you know? I don't want that, you know? I could have done that. Could have just hit up the dollar bins, pulled out a bunch of albums and made this video just to like poke a stick at people, you know? I'm not gonna do that, you know? So I want some honesty in this. Some of you could be like, hey, you did a whole video on the Walkman. Why in the world? I only need one album by them, you know? Said, hey, yeah, knock yourself out. I hope I can edit this down. I'm not kidding. The raw of this is like 25 minutes. I'm like, how the hell is that? Summer's ending. The kids are going back to school soon. Kind of need that routine. Need them to have that routine, guys. Okay, hope everybody's doing well. All right, bye.
Digital gramophone makes no sense.